This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar. Hello, everybody. Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
A lot of me in the host chair today, Alex. People that were listening to PU or listening to me now. Those emailers that email in, Matt, and say that they can't stand my voice and don't want to hear me and all that stuff. They're out of luck today.
Rough week for them.
They are rough times for them. You got my voice hosting the show, facilitating, leading the charge for almost 4 hours. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, right? I'm not going to swear today. I didn't swear on PU.
Yeah.
I'm not going to swear on this show.
Yeah, that guy's kid's listening, Evan. Come on.
That's true. I really feel bad about that now. That I do.
Somebody called in on Unfiltered and said that he turns the show on with his kid in the car. So. Yeah,
because he knows that we won't swear, which we really don't. I mean, look, SHIT, I'm not going to say it because I said I'm not going to swear. Is that, we're talking about low-level swears here, right? Like that's not an egregious, that's not a federal crime. So we're good. We're good in that respect, but not going to swear today. We are 20 days exactly today, 20 days from the start of Patriots training camp. It's Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Catch-22. We're going to do some roster projection breakdowns. Both Alex and I have roster projections up on our respective websites that you can check out. And so we're going to kind of go back and forth on some of the differences, some of the similarities, break down the roster. We're also we got to get our AFC East previews in. We forgot last week. We got on the Juwan Bentley, Devontae Parker extension train and sort of forgot to talk about the Jets. So we'll talk about the Jets. We'll talk about the Bills. Alex, you should have fun with that, talking about the Bills.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's Super Bowl favorite, Buffalo Bills. But I want to start with a few little things, a few little notes, if you will. 20 days, as I mentioned, at training camp. And I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm starting to itch a little bit. I'm starting to gear back up, starting to get ready for the start of the season and talking training camp, which is my favorite time of the year in the NFL calendar by far, because we get to actually watch practice every day and break down practice and discuss things that we're seeing and things like that. And that's always my favorite part of the year. But are you getting the itch a little bit? Are you getting ready? Or are you still enjoying you're off doing all sorts of things this summer? You're golfing, you're on the beach. Like, I don't know. I'm not as adventurous as you.
It's weird. Normally there's adventurous was the only two things, golf and beach. I went for a hike yesterday. First time in years I went for a hike.
Wow. I'm surprised that you can even walk after.
I was like, I got to the end and it was not a strenuous hike at all, but I got to the end. I'm like, wow, I'm not gassed. People I was just like, yeah, we didn't really do anything. And I was like, no, but I'm like out of shape.
Yeah, I've been doing the Peloton a little bit.
There you go.
Recently, trying to get back on the whole exercise gambit, and I can only do like the 20-minute beginner rides right now, and those are the ones you don't get out of the seat yet, right? Like, some like Jess does the ones where you like actually stand up and pedal, right? And that's supposed to add like tension and add calorie burn to the workout. I'm still in the saddle, as they say. I can't do it, and after the end of 20 minutes, I literally have to lie down like completely on the floor so I don't throw up. So it's been going really well. But you're adventurous all over the place. You're doing all these things.
It is just kind of weird because normally this year there's nothing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's no storyline. I feel like we actually have some storylines right now carrying us through this more than most years. Obviously, the main one being DeAndre Hopkins. Like, that's still an ongoing thing. It's not, are you excited for training camp? I'm more in the mindset of, are we going to get to see DeAndre Hopkins at Patriots training camp?
Right.
So that's been an interesting wrinkle to it. But, yeah, usually after the 4th of July is when I kind of start to get that itch. And you're on Threads. Like, I went on Threads last night for the first time.
So you just threaded about the show.
I did thread about the show.
Is it threaded or
welcome to the Patriots, by the way. I saw they signed up this morning.
Yeah, no threads yet.
No threads yet.
But there's talk upstairs of what the first thread is.
So
going
I
to be.
threaded that last night. What will the Patriots' first thread be?
Right. So the cool thing about Threads, not to get two millennials talking about social media, shocker, but the cool thing about Threads is that it's connected to Instagram, right? So we already own @Patriots because we own @Patriots on Instagram. So that already carries over. So nobody, even before our social media team activated a Thread account, there was no way anybody could have stole at Patriots anyways, which I think is kind of cool. But speaking for two people, just quickly on the whole social media thing, because it is July 6th and we have some time to talk about this nonsense. I basically built my career on Twitter, like literally built my career on Twitter. So if Twitter goes away, I'm going to be pretty upset about it. Like that was a big part of me getting to where I am, me being where I am and sharing my stuff and sharing my opinions on things, like instant opinions. That's been my livelihood for like 5 years, is tweeting and being on that platform. So if it disappears, then we're all out of luck.
Well, then follow us on Threads. I just picked up a couple, so if that's people listening, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I was like, because when we both started this, you had, like 7,000 followers on Twitter, and I had like 200, and I was never realistically going to catch you. But now, like, we're both starting fresh, and I have a platform now, and I was like, I'm going to catch Evan. And I was like 40 behind you most of the day. I just looked. I'm 60 behind you, so.
Could you imagine, like, just obviously I know you feel it the same way, but like just speaking for myself, I built up my following on Twitter to over 60,000 people follow me, which is amazing. Like that still blows my mind, and that's awesome. And now this app that I like basically monetized into my career is just gonna gone. Right. So I'm stressed out about it. Not gonna lie. Like I really hope that they figure this out and Elon figures it out. Thank God I'm in a good spot now with my career being here working for the Patriots, that I don't nearly have to worry about it nearly as much as I did before. But it's a little bit upsetting.
But anyway, as I was saying, like, so normally after the 4th of July is when I kind of get there, and I went on Threads last night, and it's not just who you follow that you see. It uses like it comes up with things you might want to see. And one of the first accounts I followed, because I happened to see they joined Threads, that's when I signed up, was clicking their link, is this account called the Sickos Committee, which is a bunch of diehard college football fans. So my whole thread was just college football stuff. And then I started watching the hype videos on YouTube, because those are starting to get posted now. So now I'm ready to go. And that also reminded me, you had homework last week. I'm going to guess you didn't do it.
Of course not.
Okay, that sucks.
I took some time off around the 4th. And,
Boo.
Well, I mean, got to take it when you can. But anyways, I don't hate Threads. Like, I think it's got some potential. It's not great. It's not Twitter. It's not as clean as Twitter, in my opinion. I don't know. Something about the platform just doesn't. Well,
you got to remember, it's still like the first version. They're going to build it up. So I saw they are going to add like just a following tab.
Yeah, they got to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the first things they're going to do. But they need it like this, because otherwise you can't really find people. There's no trending yet.
You're right.
Because you need a certain number of people to be on there for there to be trending. So they'll get there. I think they know what they need to do.
All right. So there's your social media 5 minutes on the death of Twitter, which seems imminent at this point. If the same CEO, or actually I guess he's not technically the CEO, the same owner of the company is still in place in Elon Musk. But we want to talk roster projection. The little bit of news that I did want to get to here off the top of the show, Alex, not DeAndre Hopkins tweeting that he had some bad clam chowder in Boston that made him sick. That's not great, Alex.
Did you see what else he tweeted, though? Did he say it made him sick? I just thought he said he hadn't.
He said that it had pork in it. I'm guessing it had like bacon bits or something like that. And he doesn't eat pork.
It didn't make him sick.
Yeah, he tweeted the throwing up emoji.
Maybe that just means he doesn't like pork.
I think it means that he doesn't feel well.
All right, well, he also tweeted, this was an hour ago, I'll retire from football when I'm not a 1,000-yard receiver. With that said, I was on pace for 1,400 yards last year, one significant injury in 11 years. I might be playing till I'm 37 the way I feel.
I hope so.
That's a guy that thinks he's in shape. Yep.
I hope it's in New England. So the one thing I'll say about DeAndre Hopkins, like resetting our opinions on that for the 17th time, it feels like at this point, I mentioned this to you off the air. I watched a Bill O'Brien coaching clinic yesterday with my afternoon. It's great. It's only like an hour. You can sit down, you can watch it, and he breaks down some of his like core empty concepts, right? Like Haas juke, like things like that. His 5-wide empty stuff, which is like vintage O'Brien, but also he's got one of the best empty packages in football at any level. Like people copy it. It's awesome stuff. Anyways, he would talk about, and he mentioned D-Hop, obviously in Houston. He mentioned Gronkowski with the Patriots, and he talked about how the different spots in the formation, like what kind of player they would aim to put in those spots, right? So, like, for example, in Haas juke, the juke route, right? The little inside route, the number 3 spot. Obviously, your quickest guy is going to go there, right? The Edelmans, the Welkers, like those types of guys, they're going to go in the middle of the field. But then he also mentioned the seam route, right? And that route, he said you need a playmaker in that spot. You need a quick guy in the number 3 spot. You need a playmaker in the number 2 spot. And he specifically mentioned number 2 weak, meaning the 2 receiver side, the weak side of the formation, having a playmaker in the seam there because of how it tilts the coverage and how if you get the right matchup pre-snap, you can basically just premeditate that you're going to go there with the football and take a shot up the seam and give your guy a chance. So the guy that he said with New England was obviously Gronk. The guy he said in Houston was DeAndre Hopkins. So with this Patriots offense, we come back to the same thing. It's like, who's the playmaker, right? Like, who's the star that you're surrounding all the other pieces are putting around it? Like, you can find, he mentioned in Houston they had Kiki Coutu, right, who they liked a little bit.
Kiki Kate? Kiki Kate.
Sure. They mentioned that they liked him a little bit. He was like sort of that quick, shifty slot guy, right?
Yeah.
He had those types of guys that he mentioned, like a Slade Bolden or Mechie in Alabama, that were like sort of those quick twitch guys. But he mentioned that the guy that really stirred the drink, the guy that really controlled the entire field, was that playmaker spot, which, again, we come back to, I think the Patriots can find a guy to run the juke route. I think they can find a guy to run the hitches on the outside that really are more about spacing than anything, right? It's not necessarily where the read is designed to go. Who's the guy that's going to control the playmaking spot? And I still, in my head, when I'm kind of thinking about it from a Patriots lens, who is it, right? Like, who is it? Gesicki, I think, can run the seam. I think he's a good seam runner. But he's really not like the tilt the coverage seam runner, right? And he's not the guy that you're putting that emphasis on of that you're a true playmaker in the offense. I sat there and I listened to this whole thing for about an hour, and I thought to myself, listening to all this, there's just no way that Bill O'Brien's like in the hallway downstairs or across the hall from us right now, not clamoring for somebody like DeAndre Hopkins to walk through the door, right? Because that's how you build out the whole system. Like, that's how you build out the whole passing offense, is by having that chess piece, that queen that you can move around, that is this like gravitational force. And I don't know if Hopkins, he mentioned that he was on that 1,400-yard pace.
Yeah.
He's not the same guy that he was in Houston when O'Brien was there, but he's still a 1,000-yard receiver in the league. He's still that player. Hopefully the clam chowder with bacon bits didn't ruin everything. But that's sort of my DeAndre Hopkins reset, and kind of pushing that to the next step too. We did get Devontae Parker's, the logistics, the details of Devontae Parker's contract today. And it does create a little bit of cap space, but that's
$2.4 million, I think it was.
That's not really what I'm more interested in. I guess what I'm more interested in is that it essentially guarantees that he's going to be on the team for the next 2 years. His base salaries both this year and next year are now guaranteed fully.
Right.
So they could cut him next year, or they could trade him next year. He's an easily movable trade piece next year still. Cutting him would have some dead cap ramifications. Now, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be like they would, be super up against it and couldn't spend any money. But typically speaking, when you carry a $3 million base salary into a season on a football team, you're not going anywhere, typically. So what are your thoughts on that sort of side of things and how this all fits together moving forward?
I think they didn't want to have to totally reset their wide receiver room next year. Like that to me, and we've discussed at this point how it's independent of anything with Hopkins.
Yeah.
You had Kendrick Bourne's in a contract year. Parker was in a contract year. Still don't know what Tyquan Thornton is. So that just left Juju Smith-Schuster as the only, regular contributing wide receiver under contract. beyond the 2023 season. And I think the idea was that they didn't want to have to rebuild that whole room in 1 year.
Yeah.
Now that you've got Parker extended, and if he's willing to take a team-friendly deal, you do it now. Because what happens if he goes off? What happens if he has a great season? And then, it becomes a totally different conversation. So they saw a chance. They probably feel like he can be a feature. Now you have Juju Smith-Schuster, you have Devontae Parker. That's a good start. And I think wide receiver is going to be a big need for them in the draft next year, one way or the other, Hopkins or not. But you have a couple pieces where we saw it with tackles this year, right? They essentially needed to rebuild their whole tackle room. And you can't, especially a position like that, a big money position like that, you can't rebuild the whole room in one offseason. I don't care how much cap space you have, how many picks you have. It's a really hard ask. That's what it is. It's a really hard ask. Now they have at least some pieces in place where they're still going to need to improve their wide receivers next year, but the sheer number of additions they'll need to make decreases.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation of it. I sort of am less worried now after maybe revisiting some things yesterday in terms of the film of Devontae Parker and DeAndre Hopkins coexisting on the field together. I think that fits a little bit better than I maybe initially thought. What I would be interested in is if you're paying DeAndre Hopkins, you have to assume you're paying him over $10 million, right? And you're already...
I would think 10 is probably the basement, like a flat 10.
Yeah, and then you're paying Juju a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
And you guaranteed Devontae Parker's salary. Now, it's not an exuberant amount of money, but the point I'm getting at is, like, who's the odd man out in 2 wide receiver packages, right? If they go 12 personnel a ton on first and second down, it's probably Devontae Parker still. But I think that element would have to be worked out a little bit, but I do think that there's more flexibility with Hopkins' game than maybe I initially thought, that he doesn't need to be glued to the boundary, right? They can still leave Devontae Parker as like the true boundary receiver or outside receiver in this offense, and I do think Hopkins has a little bit more versatility to move around the formation. So I ultimately think that that's a non-concern at this point. I have confidence that Bill O'Brien will figure out where to put everybody and how to get everybody on the field and how to utilize everyone. There's still a little bit of like skill set overlap that I don't love. Like, I do think you're a little slow at the receiver position and a little contested target heavy with that group. But I think from a alignment standpoint or a formation standpoint, like, they'll figure all that stuff out. I wouldn't get too bogged down in that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was just the Juwan Bentley reset here. I've heard this a little bit, and I just have a take on it slightly about. I know that Bedard is like the big one that's on this, but some of your station, Alex, they picked up
Okay.
up the Bedard takes, right?
Oh boy, where's this going?
So I hear a lot of like, well, they had to re-sign Juwan Bentley to this contract because they have no linebackers in the pipeline to replace Juwan Bentley. And I guess my pushback on that is, at some point, they have to commit to some guys, right? And they have to have like a core group of players. And I understand that Juwan Bentley is a specific type of linebacker. He's a throwback, sledgehammer, downhill thumper. He is not Fred Warner. He's not an athletic, coverage, rangy, 3-down guy, right? That's just not who he is. But at the same time, I think he's really, really, really good at what they want him to do or what they ask him to do in this defense. I think he's a captain. I think he's a leadership, kind of intangible style guy. And at some point, with 33 veterans under contract, that's all they have next year.
Yeah.
They have 17 rookies in this year with the 5 UDFAs, and they have 33 veterans under contract. They have a bunch of guys that are UFAs, unrestricted free agents next offseason. At some point, don't you have to start building a core and like setting down some foundational pillar pieces? And not all of those pieces are going to be all pro caliber players, right? Like, not all of them are going to be Matthew Judons and that type of level of player, but you have to have some culture guys. You have to have some locker room guys. You have to have some glue guys. And I look at Juwan Bentley as one of those guys. I think that he's really understands his role, understands the defense inside and out, and maybe most importantly, like, understands the culture and fits the culture of the team. And I think at that point, you have to start locking in some of those types of guys. And this like notion that it would have been better to draft and replace Juwan Bentley than pay Juwan Bentley, it's like, you can't draft and replace everybody every 4 years, right? Like I know in some positions maybe that's the best way to go, like running back. I'm always on that. Just draft and replace. But at some point you have to have some guys that have been Patriots for longer than 2 minutes, right?
I mean, there's only like 6 or 7 guys on the team now who won a Super Bowl here, and Bentley is sort of one of them. He was on the team that year. He was hurt, but he was, in the building for it. Yeah, he's a culture guy. I think you mentioned the communication. When you lose a guy like Devin McCourty, the communication on the defensive side of the ball is very important. And it's not like they overextended themselves to get him.
Yeah.
If they'd paid him like one of the top linebackers in the league, one of these like 3 down guys, I'd be like, all right, that's a little much. But $4.5 million a year, I think, is what it came out to guaranteed, right? That's an easy deal to take for a player of Bentley's caliber. Easy deal to take.
Yeah, I think he's an underrated player. I think that because of his style of play, people think that he's a sort of his type of player has aged out of football, right? Like that, it's a dinosaur type of role. But I think he's a really underrated player. I think he's gotten better in space and in coverage than he was at the beginning of his career. Maybe not athletically, but instinctually, to make up for the fact that he's not the best athlete or the fastest guy or the most nimble guy. Now he's been better at being a little bit like a step ahead of things, right? Because of his anticipation and his mental aspect of the game. So I really like the Bentley contract. I really think that that's the type of guy that you want to keep around and you want to be one of the captains of this team. I think he's going to be a captain this year, honestly.
He was a captain last year. Why wouldn't he be?
Was he? So I couldn't remember. He was a
captain.
Gap,
he was a captain in 2020 because Hightower opted out.
Right.
And then he wasn't a captain in 21 because Hightower came back.
Yeah.
And then he was a captain last year because Hightower was unofficially retired. Can I call him that?
I think he's retired.
No, he's retired now, but I'm saying like he wasn't retired last year, but he wasn't here.
Yeah. All right. So that's sort of your reset of where things stand in Patriot land. Not much going on. We're in the dead period of the offseason for the most part. But we're still got a few things there to touch on, and you can join in at 855-PATS-500, email webradio@patriots.com. We're going to get into the roster projection part of the show here and try to rifle through both of our roster projections. Alex, are you ready? You got yours up?
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
All right, you're going to pull yours up, and I'm going to do the easiest one right off the bat, which is quarterback. 2 quarterbacks here, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. I have Trace McSorley getting cut and probably retained on the practice squad, and I do not currently have Malik Cunningham with the quarterbacks. So those are my 3 quarterbacks right now, Jones and Zappi on the roster, McSorley the cut, but also coming back on the practice squad most likely. And I have I think with the quarterbacks, and I don't know, I'm sure you had it the same way.
Yeah.
With the quarterbacks, the main thing that we have to look at it's a big picture conversation with the quarterback position. It's not about roster cuts and who's going to make the team. We know the 2 guys that are going to make the team. It's about the big picture conversation with this position, and I think this is currently right now is the hardest but the biggest sticking point with the entire Patriots team. And I really don't feel like I'm overstating it. I know that sounds like hyperbolic, right?
You can just say hyperbole.
I know that sounds like hyperbole.
It either sounds like hyperbole or it sounds hyperbolic. It
sounds. I think hyperbole is easier to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know it sounds like hyperbole, but I really think that this is a true crossroads for this organization. You have to make a decision on Mac Jones in many ways.
Yeah.
And the main one, in my mind, is that you need to decide, is Mac Jones a truck or is he a trailer? Is he pulling the wagon or is he riding the wagon? And separate aside from all the contract stuff, which we could also get into and is also part of the big picture here, if you decide that Mac Jones is more of along for the ride than he is leading the charge, then you need to change how your whole philosophy of team building. We've talked about this ad nauseum. You need to become the San Francisco 49ers, right? Where you're paying everybody else. You're paying all the 2020 draft picks, Josh Uche, Kyle Duggar, Mike Onwenu. You're signing DeAndre Hopkins. Next offseason, you're making a wide receiver trade. You're making a move at all the positions on offense to load up and have all sorts of firepower and maximize having a good, not great quarterback. And maybe you take that good, let's say Mac's the 16th best quarterback in the league. Maybe he's the 10th best quarterback in the league if he's got all these weapons to throw to. And that's how you have to build it. Or you need Mac to elevate his game to the point where he's the captain and he's driving the ship. So I think the bigger question is that in him? Is Mac Jones capable of doing that? And is the team capable of changing their philosophy? Or are we looking at a scenario where after year 3, we're talking about moving on from Mac Jones because they want to build the roster a certain way and they want to spend in a certain way, which means that you have to go chase the golden goose, right? You have to go chase the Josh Allen, the Patrick Mahomes. You can't sit here in purgatory. And I think that's honestly the bigger than any of the other, like, who's the 5th receiver and who's going to be, the running back depth and like all these other sort of camp battles and roster conversations we're going to have over the next couple months. That's the biggest thing with this team right now is what do they have in Mac Jones and what is their direction with Mac Jones at the quarterback position?
Well, the other thing within all of that is we're not going to know that in camp. Yeah. We're not going to know that this spring. I mean, that's a December, January conversation. I will say this, though, and I think it's even simpler than what you said. They may be okay with Mac Jones being just a guy who's here, a guy who doesn't win them games but doesn't lose them games. They may be okay with that. Yeah, they'll need to make some adjustments. It's that 5th-year option.
Yeah.
Are you committing to Mac Jones long-term or not? I think even beyond just are you going to change the way you build around him? And I know we do this every year, and you yell at me for this, but because of the way the NIL stuff works, and there's kind of a fluke thing coming up. This year's quarterback class is loaded. There is nobody in the 2025 class. Now, you'll tell me, well, sometimes guys go back to school, and there'll be guys there in 2025. Why are they going back to school? Because they weren't good. Okay, nobody's good who goes back to school.
But counterpoint, one, couldn't they say, oh, well, like, Caleb Williams is going number 1 overall in this draft and no one else is even close. So I'm going to go back and maybe next year I could be the number 1 pick in the draft. Or there's always...
Not really.
Okay, but...
That doesn't happen.
Or there's always the Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, like, out of nowhere player, too.
So Joe Burrow being the exception, generally those guys don't fare well in the NFL. Those guys, it's
That's
generally those guys are proven to be the flash in the pan that they look like.
I guess that's fair. Although I think that if like Baker came here, that it would be.
I don't think so. I think it would be the same thing. But
I like
again, the point being, remember how we did this last year. It's a bad year to need a quarterback.
Yeah,
it's a bad. Next year is not a bad year to need a quarterback.
Right.
So if you're gonna need a quarterback, take care of it next year. That's kind of. I don't know if they look at things like that. I don't know. It's really easy for me, not having my livelihood on the line, to sit here from 10,000 feet and say, here's the 2024 class, here's the 2025 class. I'd rather pick from 2024. But there is kind of an element of that it all lines up. You're deciding on the 5th-year option. You have a strong quarterback class. It's all right. If they do want to move on in the offseason, the conditions are perfect for them to do so.
It's also perfect to do so, and I'm not team move on yet.
I'm not either. But I'm saying if you're going to move on, do it right.
And it's also the best time to trade them.
Yep.
It's the best time to trade them because you still have a full year of the 4th and then technically the 5th-year option would then maybe be available if you picked it up and you had 2 years of team control for the team that's acquiring him. So it's the best year to trade him as well. I come back.
But again, I want to hear. I think they're going to be fine. I think he's going to prove enough that they should give him a long-term deal and, like you said, build around him Niners plan.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But I'd rather, as much as I want them to stick with Mac Jones because I think he's the guy compared to moving on, if they are going to move on, I want them to move on correctly.
Yeah, and quickly, honestly.
There's
no time
one
to
and
waste.
The same, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the big thing with Mac is what I keep coming back to with him is like, all right, with an offense that has, for lack of a better term, has its head screwed on properly, right? And for an offense that's going to have an OC that understands how to call plays and understands how to sequence plays and game plan and install basic foundational elements this time of year and all the great things that Bill O'Brien we've talked about and that Bill O'Brien brings to the table. All of that is going to get Mac Jones back to like a baseline level of performance that would probably reflective of his rookie year.
Right.
He has to be better than that in my eyes to be willing to commit to him long term.
And that's
he has to be better.
And what that comes down to is how fast can he unlearn some of the bad habits that were developed last year, and that's the big question.
And that, I think, is where, where my reluctance or like my hesitation comes from, is because, unfortunately, even though I thought he looked better in the spring, and granted it's just OTAs and mini camp and non-padded practices, and there were receivers out. We should mention that he didn't always have his full complement of receivers out there. Even though it looked better, did it look great? Like, did it look awesome? You know what I mean? Like, did it look like they were lighting it up out there with the passing game? Like, I wasn't there. Like, I still think that there was some, like, just hesitation in his game. You know what I mean? Like, just not that confident, like, step your foot, put your foot in the door and rip it in there. And I think that still remains to be seen if that's going to come along. And then I would also mention that handling pressure. You don't really see that in a training camp or a mini camp setting. Until the bullets are live, we won't know. Until he's in an actual NFL game and he's playing. Is he better under pressure? Is he more poised? Does he know where his answers are? Does he know how to protect himself? Like, those types of things, I think, are still a big element of it too. So it's a big part of it. But But
again, it's not something we're gonna like go out there in the spring and be like, oh hey, they Mac Jones is the guy, or no, he's not. We're not gonna know till. If we know before December, that's alarming.
Right. So here's my question that we might know something about a little bit sooner. We basically, on this program, I'll speak for you. You can correct me if you don't feel this way, but we basically put to bed a quarterback competition in the spring, and kind of said that that's not how it looked, and that's not how we feel it's going. Is there any world in your mind where a month from now we're talking about Bailey Zappi?
Not a month from now.
So you don't think that this is at all going to be a camp storyline? Is my point that I guess I'm trying to.
No, it would have to get, unless like Mac gets hurt. No.
Okay.
If you want to tell me in October, because again, I still don't feel great about the tackle position, and if Mac continues to get sped up, you probably do need to get somebody in there. But unless Mac gets hurt, like the things we need to judge him on, we can't judge him on in camp.
Yeah.
So how can it become a conversation? Is Bailey Zappi just going to be that good? I feel like if he was actually that good, and again, I don't think Bailey Zappi's bad, but if he was that good, we would have seen it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't see it happening either. And I keep coming back to the same thing with Bailey Zappi, and then we can move on, is just, what is he better at than Mac Jones? Like, what can you say? So you can maybe say that he showed more poise. I think he did. I think he showed more poise than
against
Mac.
Two of the worst defenses in the league with more extra blockers and more quarterback-friendly
But my point
mechanics.
is, I'm getting there. My point with the poise thing is that he was not screwed up right? Like, that was all he knew. That was the only coaching staff he knew.
Right.
That was the only system that he knew. So as broken as it was, he wasn't going from Josh McDaniels' buttoned-up offense to Matt Patricia's offense.
Well, and that's like, he wasn't running the same offense Mac Jones was running.
Yeah.
He kind of was running Josh McDaniels' offense.
There was some differences too. That's fair.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big reason why Bailey Zappi looked more comfortable, is because he didn't know any better. Like,
I'll give you the one thing I legitimately think Bailey Zappi does better than Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit of a problem for Mac Jones. It's something he needs to work on this year. When he's in the pocket, he's a little loose with the football. He got strip sacked a few times.
Yeah.
Bailey Zappi keeps a tight grip on the football. That's the one thing. And look, that's something they'll look at. But one that's really fixable for Mac. That's like a simple coaching point. And that's not, if you're flipping your starting quarterback, if you're giving up on your first round pick because the other guy fumbles, and I don't think Mac fumbles a ton.
Yeah.
I like, it's neutral with him. I just think that's a part of the reason I had Bailey Zappi as a Patriots target when he was coming out, is I was like, he does not give the football away. That's just a big plus in Bailey Zappi's checkbox.
So I think the one thing that I will say to give Bailey Zappi credit, because I feel like I'm always crapping all over him, is what I was trying to get out, is I do think he throws the ball to the sideline a little bit better than Mac, like with a little bit more zip, a little bit more anticipation. Like, if you're trying to hit like a 12-yard out,
yeah,
like, who do you want making that throw? Neither one of them have like cannons. Like, don't get me wrong. But if you really want to hit a 12-yard out for some reason, like, and if you're watching it in practice, I think is a better way to put it.
Yeah. And
they're running the 12-yard out in warm-ups, and Mac goes and then Bailey goes, I think that there's a little bit more gas on Bailey's throw.
But maybe a little bit. The rest of you're not building your whole offense on that. And their offense especially, they're like Bill O'Brien doesn't throw to the sidelines. That's not what his offense is all in the middle of the field. So that doesn't really do a lot right now.
No, I don't disagree. I want to give Bailey a little bit of
no.
A little bit of credit.
It's so annoying because Evan, you know this better than anybody. Before Bailey Zappi was a Patriot, I was the president of the Bailey Zappi fan club.
Oh,
now apparently I hate him.
Yeah. Quick diversion on the Bailey Zappi. It's related, but just a quick story, I guess I should say. We were outside, middle of the freaking winter. It was freezing. I remember I was me. I'm a wimp, so I like bundle up like Canada Goose hat, like the whole thing. We're standing outside. We're waiting to go into practice, and Alex is telling me how he's gonna like stay up till like 10 o'clock at night on Saturday night to watch this quarterback from Western Kentucky named Bailey Zappi. And the fact that I don't know who
is breaking every single NCAA record.
The fact that I don't know who Bailey Zappi is a crime against humanity. And this guy is breaking all sorts of records, and how could I not know, and how could I not want to watch, and all this stuff. And lo and behold, he gets freaking drafted by the Patriots.
It's like, remember, who was it that tweeted that like last year, that in the NFL now a quarterback's either top 10 or he sucks.
Yeah.
And we're not allowed to put anybody in the middle ground. Like, Bailey Zappi's a fine backup quarterback. If you need him to start a couple games, he can start a couple games, and you could certainly do much worse. Like, that's what he is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Chase McDaniel's made more money per pass attempt than anybody Chase Daniel, not McDaniel.
Yeah.
Chase Daniel's made more money per pass attempt than anybody in NFL history.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I want to give him the keys to the franchise, but that also doesn't mean I think he's terrible. I just think he is what he is. Call a spade a spade.
All right, let's move on to running backs. It's a good rant on the quarterbacks there. So running backs, I didn't do it on this one. Where you have something else coming out where we have like locks and bubbles and whatever.
I do that so I do like a last three on.
Yeah, I did that, but never mind. So the way I feel currently about the running backs is that I have 4 running backs on the roster. They typically keep 4. That's typically their number coming out of camp. And Ramondre Stevenson, Ty Montgomery, Pierre Strong, and Kevin Harris are the 4 guys, obviously. I cannot envision a scenario, aside from Dalvin Cook being a Patriot, where those 4 guys aren't on this team. Like, they're not going to carry less than 4 running backs.
Right.
There's no J.J. Taylor. No offense to J.J. Taylor, is not pushing the envelope.
Nope.
With any
He's
of
had
those.
he's had 3 years to do it, and he hasn't done it.
Right. So, in my mind, it's like impossible. Like, how are they not viewed currently, with the caveat that there's nobody coming in from the outside? How do you view those 4 guys as anything but locks? Like they need them.
I wonder if they could get Kevin Harris to the practice squad and promote him. Because like you said, they kept 4 initially last year. Remember, they went into games with only 2 healthy running backs. Like, totally just, this is what we're going to do. So if they can get Kevin Harris to the practice squad, he'll be here and he'll play in games. Right. And he would be, it's what they did with him last year. Remember, they released him initially last year, and then they signed him back off the practice squad.
So I don't necessarily disagree with you, but with that position, there are injuries in camp every year, and I do wonder if he's one of those guys that puts up like 150 yards in the 3rd preseason game in the 4th quarter.
But that's what he did last year. And then Tom Montgomery got hurt, and he went on IR, and they signed him. And because you have, the 3-week thing, you can return or whatever it is now, 6 weeks. I have Kevin Harris on. Yeah. I think they keep all 4, but it would not be the most surprising. I think I had, let me scroll to the bottom here because I wrote this like a month ago. I think I had Harris as one of my last. I had him as like the 5th to last guy on. So
you have him as a bubble guy,
but not like right on the bubble, but like bubble adjacent. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing is too, to strengthen your argument, and I wrote about this again. You can find this on 985thesportshub.com. Is Ty Montgomery going to play more receiver this year? Because if the plan is for him to be used more in that regard, well, now you kind of have to keep Harris because
he needs the early down work.
Well, not just that. If Ty Montgomery's a receiver, you're down to 2 backs. And one of them is a guy that's not that Harris is super proven either, but you're down to 2 backs, and one of them has played in like 2 NFL games. That's when you start talking about that Demario Douglas spot on the roster, I think, as being more of a bubble spot. But I think they keep 4, but I'm not as sold on Harris being like a true lock as you are.
Okay. I don't know how they go into the season without the depth Now, maybe you're right. Maybe they can sneak him onto the practice squad, and that's how they feel. But I just feel
he'll be here. Don't get that twisted.
Depth, in my opinion. But I also would say that it's also kind of role specific. They have Ramondre, we know that. They have Montgomery and Pierce Strong to be kind of the scat back, receiving back, third down back role. But who's like the backup? Like who's the first and second down guy besides Ramondre right now? Is it Pierce Strong?
It's probably Pierce Strong. But
is that like what he's built for and what they want him to do? And like, you know,
if they use him right, it is. It's just more in the practice squad elevations have kind of screwed up doing roster projections. Like, because it's so arbitrary the way we do these because we're trying to guess the initial 53.
Yeah.
Let's say we get something like last year where somebody gets hurt in camp, right? Or I'll just use I would think he's going to be ready for the season, but I just know off the top of my head he's hurt. Let's say, again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. By all accounts, he's fine. But let's say Juju has to open the season on PUP.
Yeah.
You get him on the initial 53. Or no, you don't have to get...
I know what you're trying to say.
I don't want to make up a player getting hurt, but like let's say a player gets hurt, right? On the initial 53,
injured
IR, Kevin Harris back from the practice squad week 1. He doesn't, even though you cut him,
right?
He's still on the week 1 roster. So that's where I hate these because I go for the initial 53.
There's fluidity to it.
Right.
Right.
So I'm not saying Kevin Harris won't be here, and I agree with you. I've said this. I want to see him add another back. Doesn't have to be Dalvin Cook. We've talked about Leonard Fournette and Ezekiel Elliott and Reggie Corbin and all those guys. Shout out to the two-time USFL champion Birmingham Stallions. And they got a couple of Patriots. Jamar Smith, former Patriots quarterback Jamar Smith. Yeah, so he was the MVP of the game last year. This year he was hurt, so he didn't play. It was Alex Magoo took over as the quarterback. It was really good. But anyway, the point being, Kevin Harris will be here.
Yeah.
I just don't know that he's on that technical, like, initial 53-man roster.
All right, so here's my other thing, quickly, with the running backs. Dalvin Cook, yes or no? Do you think there's any real – there's smoke to it. I don't know if there's fire, but there's smoke.
Well, I mean, this is where, you know, what is – not to get all philosophical and stuff, right? But what is interest? Is it –
I think there is legitimate mutual interest between the both parties, but I think that it's the typical Patriots thing, and the player is not dying to play for New England because of it, and it's would we take Dalvin Cook at our number? Of course. We would take Dalvin Cook at our number. Every team would take Dalvin Cook at their number.
Right.
But that's it. That's all
That's the thing. By the way, other Patriots on the Birmingham Stallions, Scooby Wright.
Okay.
And not a former Patriot, but Patriot adjacent, Thad Moss.
Oh,
Randy Moss's son.
Yes,
so there you go. I think it's Dalvin Cook's a good player, right? I think they're kind of saying, hey, if you want to come here and play for like $2 million, we're not going to say no to that. But no, $5-6 million isn't happening. So I think they're interested in the sense that they take him. They're not going to just close the door on him and say, sorry, we're not interested. But I don't think they're going to overextend themselves to go out and get him, nor should they. That's Hopkins. Hopkins is the guy they need to do that for. If they end up chasing Cook and putting the money into Cook that they're now no longer in the running for Hopkins, I would call that a mistake.
So the last thing I'll say about the running backs that I think is cool about Bill O'Brien's offense is I think a guy like Ty Montgomery, and I hope that Pierre Strong becomes this guy eventually as he learns the NFL game and the offense and becomes a little bit more of an explosive version of what I'm about to outline, but Bill O'Brien does a really good job of like moving running backs around to change up formations. So you can put like 12 or 11 personnel out on the field and you can be empty out of that, or you can be like under center power, right? Like you can do both those things in this system. I think that they really are super high on Ty Montgomery's versatility. I think he's going to be somebody that they are basically you mentioned him playing more receiver, and this is just sort of what jogged this in my brain. I think that they're going to use him as both, right? Like where there's going to be times where they're going to go 5 wide and they're going to put him out at a receiver spot. And then they're probably going to motion him back in the backfield sometimes and create matchups that way, right? Also indicators, right? Like if a linebacker matches him when he motions out, it's probably man coverage. If they just bump over, it's probably zone coverage, like those types of things too. So I think you're going to see a lot of that sort of flexibility and versatility be used to an advantage with a guy like Ty Montgomery. This position still gives me a little bit of pause. I still think that they need another body there. and I say another body, I don't mean Reggie Corbin. And I also don't necessarily mean it needs to be Dalvin Cook either. Like there's a middle ground that also
Benny Snell.
That could potentially Benny Snell that could also potentially exist there. But I do think that they would benefit from having one more guy in camp that's a fifth running back that has a chance to make the roster, not a JJ Taylor, like a legitimate NFL rosterable back. All right, let's do wide receivers. Obviously, this is a highly talked about position, but as things currently stand, based off of operating on the presumption that DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be here because he's not currently on the team. I have 5 wide receivers making the team. They are Juju, Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, and currently I have Demario Douglas, but I really think that fifth receiver spot is a complete and total wild card that is way too early to call. Right? This is going to come down to training camp and who pops in camp, who has a good preseason, who has a good joint practices in those back-to-back weeks. So I think the fifth receiver spot is still way too early to tell and extremely wide open. But again, similar to how I mentioned with the 4 running backs, if DeAndre Hopkins isn't here, those 4 receivers are going to be on this football team, the top 4 that I mentioned. And
it could be one of those things we talk about, and I have the same group as you.
Yeah.
We talk about that 5th wide receiver spot. Does it even exist? We did this last year with Trey Nixon and Lil Jordan Humphrey and Christian Wilkerson, and it was this intense battle all the way down to the last day, and then they all got cut.
Yeah.
None of them made the team. With Mike Gesicki, with Ty Montgomery, who can both contribute as wide receivers, I can see them doing that again too. I think there's a role for Douglas. That's what's exciting. And we've talked about that, about him filling in that Marcus Jones role so they can use that package more often. But we don't even know if that role exists to begin with. Like you said, that's going to be a fascinating storyline all throughout camp. But yeah, the top four, that's well established, assuming everybody's healthy. And then it's Douglas, Booty, Ed Lee, Trey Nixon. Can anybody earn that 5th spot? And I think prove to the team that it's worth keeping a 5th player at the position outright.
So the one reason why I agree with that totally, but the one reason why I really am thinking and leaning Demario Douglas just early, like as we both had Demario Douglas on for the time being, doesn't it feel like they really kind of need that shifty slot receiver, like not the power slot, not the Juju slot receiver, but like that true, I know he's not quite that, but like the Welkers, right? Like the Welkers, the Edelmans, like
shifty slot.
I still think in this offense, quickness is in the inside of the formation is key. Like I still think they need somebody that's like that. They don't really have that guy in this room if it's not Demario Douglas. Like I don't really know who else fits that mold. And I
mean, Ed Lee does, but he's not so far away. Yeah,
I just feel like it's worth that. And I mentioned the coaching clinic thing and stuff like I mentioned Kiki Katu.
Kiki Kate.
Are you sure it's Kate?
I thought it was Kate. I'll look. I haven't thought about him in a while.
So silly.
I was a fan of his game when he came out. Texas Tech.
The fact that he played like meaningful snaps just tells you how much Bill O'Brien cares about quickness.
He was Pat Mahomes' guy at Texas Tech.
Yeah, like they need some quickness out of this group. Right now, this group is about essentially outside of Tyquan, who's got the straight line speed. But Juju and Devontae Parker are the other guys that are going to play a ton, and those guys are power guys. Like, they're bullies. You know, they're going to win with size and power and strength at the catch point and things like that. They're not going to get open on a dime. You know, they're not going to shake a linebacker on a juke route or run away over the middle on a little in cut. Like, that's not their game. So I do think that they would like to develop Demario Douglas.
How did you pronounce it again?
Katu.
It's QT. So it's not QT, it's QT. QT.
Even that guy played some.
He's not bad. I don't know why you're dumping on QT. He's not a bad player.
I'm not dumping on him. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't have to be Wes Welker. Like, you know, like we don't have to talk about stars. Like,
well, he's not available. He's on the Saints.
So, anyways, I still think that favors Demario Douglas. I got this question a lot and pushed back a little bit of like what happens with Booty, right? I think that everybody's still, not everybody. There's still a big group of Patriots fans.
Rhymes with bread shirt.
Oh, what?
You said what happens with...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, rhymes with bread
I thought
shirt.
we were still talking about Kiki Kate for a second.
No.
So what happens with Kayshon Boutte? You say red shirt. Is he the type of guy that... Is there a path for him, like with the true Patriot red shirt of the Foxborough flu and him ending up on injured reserve in August and not being eligible to make the initial 53-man roster and even play this year, and like having that work out in the long run, because my fear with a player like that is like if he's not involved and he's not in the program, that the things outside of football are going to pull on him. You know what I'm trying to say? Like I don't. His character concerns me.
Yeah, you want him busy. You want him locked in and all of that. I mean, is he healthy?
Yeah.
He could be locked in on rehabbing. He said he had a broken, right? It reminded me from wrong here. He said he had a broken ankle.
Very bad ankle
at the
injury.
but it was broken at the combine.
He said that it was still a problem at the combine. Still coming back from it.
So that's not an easy recovery.
Well,
so,
I mean, if you remember, that was a really bad injury.
Yeah. So if it's, I mean, he's still going to be focused on like rehab and stuff. And the guy's a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
We'll call it what it is. Guy's a lottery ticket. We knew that. That's why he went in the 6th round. He was at one point considered the top wide receiver in a class that included Jackson Smith and Jigba. He was considered the most talented player in that class. You see the flashes on tape. So there's a reason the Patriots got him when they did. I think it's not an invalid concern. I would say what's the alternative? Cutting him outright, just giving up on him without even finding out, or just keeping him on the roster for what?
I guess the alternative would be hoping that he gets back to the practice squad.
So here's the thing. I don't think you're getting him to the practice squad because he's going to go off and he's going to be really good in the preseason.
If he's healthy.
All right, but if he's not healthy, then you're just putting him. So you just want to keep him on the practice squad, but on IR, basically. Keep him on the practice squad hurt.
The thing is, if he's on the practice squad, then if he gets healthy and he looks good in practice, he's at least still eligible to play in game.
I guess. Yeah. It's a weird situation. It's a weird situation.
It's a different one, and
it's funny because you talk about that quickness, like he could kind of be in that role.
Yeah, he has a little bit of that. I think he's still like more skews towards like the Juju Kendrick Bourne inside receiver than he does.
He's got, I think, a little more wiggle than those guys.
He's got some.
He's got more wiggle than Smith-Schuster.
Yeah,
I don't know about Bourne. I think Bourne's kind of a comparable player.
It's interesting. It's a tough one, but this is. I'm trying not to do it again, Alex. I'm trying not to pull a Maurice Harris, right? Like I'm going to give the guy a chance to show me something in camp. It obviously wasn't there in the spring, but maybe he's a different guy in a couple weeks, and he looks like a different guy. I hope so for their sake, because that would obviously benefit the team. But
yeah,
I think that's where we're at. And Malik Cunningham, no.
I mean, he'll be here. He's going to be on the practice squad, scout team, quarterback, all that, and they'll see what they can do with him as a wide receiver, but I don't think he plays this year.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's move on to tight ends. I think the interesting thing about the tight ends, we know Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are going to be here. I do think this is a huge tipping point for the team, that if this duo is better, it should be better than the Jonnu Smith-Hunter Henry duo anyways, but if it's like actually good, it really changes a lot, you know what I mean, in terms of their outlook offensively. But the bigger question from a roster standpoint is, do they carry a third tight end? Now, 2 years ago, the first year of the Henry-Jonnu duo, they had a fullback. They had Jakob Johnson.
Yeah.
So they had 2 tight ends and a fullback. Last year, they just had 2 tight ends. No fullback, just Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. So there's a little bit of precedent for them carrying only 2 tight ends. I initially only have 2 tight ends on the roster right now, and I'm saying tight ends a lot, because I don't know if I feel like Firkser, Washington, Lumpkin, Sokol, that group, I don't know if I feel like any of that group needs to be on the 53. I think you are going to get at least one, probably more than one guy back on the practice squad if you want him there, and I'm not sure that you need to protect him on the initial roster. So that's why I currently only have 2.
I'm with you on this one. I got a lot of crap when I post this. How can you only keep 2 tight ends? If they're going to be 2 tight end heavy, you need backups. And this is where, like I said before, the whole practice squad elevation thing kind of screws with the whole idea of roster projection, because 5 years ago, we would have had to keep a third tight end. We would have been handcuffed. I talk about the positional minimums all the time, and the at-large roster spots, you'd lose one year. You'd have to keep 3 tight ends. They can get away with 2 because let's say you get Lumpkin, Sokol, and Firkser. Let's say you get those 3 on the practice squad. I don't think it's unrealistic for them to keep 3 tight ends on they change the number every year. 16-man practice squad?
Yeah.
Not unrealistic at all. Lumpkin, Firkser, and Sokol.
Yeah.
Each of those guys can be elevated twice. You're now at 6 weeks. You're now well into the season, and you've had 3 tight ends for every game.
And then if somebody gets hurt
gets hurt, you sign somebody to the roster. So, no, they are very much good, I think, just keeping the 2 and letting the cards fall where they may from there.
I would also mention that if one of Gesicki or Hunter Henry, and hopefully they don't, but if one of them do get hurt, then they just won't be a 12 personnel team.
Right. And this is what we've talked about,
won't.
where they do have the wide receiver depth where they don't need to kind of they'll be okay. They'll be okay if they go from 12 to 11.
So anyways, the other conversation about the tight ends, just quickly, is about how exactly what kind of skill set do they really want out of a third tight end? Like, if we're going to talk about a third tight end actually pushing for a roster spot here and making it so that they should have a roster spot for this guy, they kind of have some different body types and different skill sets out of the backups here. So Ferkser is like that H-back move tight end type of detached wing piece, right? Like, he's not a guy that's going to be an inline guy too much, but he can move around. He can play outside, detached from in the slot, or maybe probably not out wide. I'd say more in the slot, and maybe a little bit in the backfield, right? In sort of like an H-back fullback style role. So they have that type of guy. The one guy, and you've kind of talked me into this a little bit, is Johnny Lumpkin.
Yeah.
Who looks like a tackle. Literally
big guy.
Big dude.
Big guy.
Fills out a jersey, looks like a tackle in a 60s jersey out at practice in the spring. So if that's my main point is like what kind of guy do they want in that spot? And I'm starting to like sway a little bit towards Johnny Lumpkin, honestly, because Gesicki and Hunter Henry are not impact blockers. They're not impact in the line blockers. And ideally, honestly, I don't think you'd want to use Gesicki at all as an inline guy.
Nope.
I don't think that's really what you want him here at all doing. So it's not so much that you're going to put Lumpkin in the game a ton, but I do think that there's going to be certain game plans where first down's going to be a rundown for this team. And maybe he is in a game plan where he plays 10 to 15 snaps on first down because they are going to run the football. You are going to have a blocking tight end for short yardage. You are going to have a blocking tight end on the goal line, like those types of situations. And I think that Johnny Lumpkin can be that guy. He's just going to be a blocker, but he's going to hold up his end of the bargain in that department. And with the type of tight ends that they have at the top of the depth chart, that could be a really useful player situationally. And if anybody's going to make a push for it, I think it might be Lumpkin, simply because there's a game day role for Johnny Lumpkin. Like, you can project that inline blocking role having an active roster spot on Sunday.
He also played some special teams at Louisiana, so he can contribute there as well. And I think if there is a third tight end, I think it's Lumpkin. But again, right now they're in a situation where he's not a guy that's going to light up preseason.
No.
Right? So they should be able to get him to the practice squad and go from there.
Okay. So last one here, offensive line. This is a big one. I currently, and I know they're not going to carry 10 offensive linemen on the roster, but I have these 10 guys as guys that I think really have a chance and to make the team, and are basically 7 or 8 of them I think are pretty much locks. So Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, Riley Reif, Calvin Anderson, Connor McDermott, and the 3 rookies, Sidy Sow, Antonio Mafi, Jake Andrews. So my guess is they get this down to 8 or 9. Most likely it'll probably be a decision that's made for them with an injury, and one guy ends up on the old Foxborough flu path, one of the rookies. And then I wonder how many of these tackles are they truly going to keep, because you are in a position where, you want the depth, you want the options in case it goes awry, but you're talking about keeping McDermott, Brown, Reif, Anderson, and then maybe a guy like Sidy Sow who can kind of play both spots, both tackle and guard. It's a lot of bodies for one spot to carry basically 5 guys that play that one position. So maybe this gets solved for them with injuries, unfortunately, as we know how these things go.
Yeah.
But those are the 10 guys that I think that have a really good chance to make the team. Cody Rusey, maybe. I just don't really see why they need to make put a backup center on the roster. I don't really think he's going to play much guard.
He's practice squad guy. Him, Ferentz, Hines. So the one thing I toyed with, so I had this on my post-draft roster projection going into the spring. I had them cutting Connor McDermott and bringing him back after somebody's put on IR. I think McDermott is a guy you could do that with. It would be a little harder, but you could also do it with Calvin Anderson.
Yeah.
So those are 2 guys. Again, it's that weird thing. Are they on the initial 53? Maybe not. They'll be here. But McDermott, 1-year deal. That one's super easy. You cut him.
McDermott, I think, is cuttable. I think Reif and Anderson everybody's cuttable out of this group.
Reif has a lot of guaranteed money. That's a tough one.
I think Anderson and Reif's contracts suggest that they're probably.
I remember I looked this up months ago. Anderson's wouldn't be ideal, but it's also not unrealistic.
Yeah.
Given the money. McDermott's the easy one. McDermott, you cut him, you make the other moves you need to make, you bring him back.
Yeah.
Easy. Done. I could see that with him. I think they'd rather keep him, obviously, but they're going to have – this is what teams do now. They get creative to maximize the 53 spots between IR and the practice squad and this and that.
So the one thing that I wanted to say about the offensive line, along with just all this roster shuffling, how do you feel about Mike Onwenu playing right tackle? Like, where are you on that?
I've been on that train since they moved him out there the first time.
Yeah, 2020.
I think look, is he a better guard than tackle? Yes. But I think minimally, and when you factor in the positional value, and then you look at where their roster's at right now, they have a ton of candidates for right guard. I'm not going to get too excited about Antonio Mafi because we've only seen him in non-padded practices, but Mafi's a guy who could potentially do it. City Sal's a guy who could potentially do it. James Ferentz, Chasen Hines, they have options there. Not all, none of them are going to be all pros, but they have options there, which they don't have at tackle. Onwenu's better out there, and the reality is, I don't think they're bringing Onwenu back one way or the other. So the whole thing about, well, you're moving him out there and then you're going to have to pay him more to sign him, not necessarily. If they've come to terms with the fact that he's not going to be here long term, then who cares?
Yeah, I just think it's not only better for the player, because I think for him, then he could go to market as a right tackle.
Oh, I'm sure he'd love it. I'm sure he if they asked him about it, he'd be thrilled to do it.
And I also think that this is an old Skarneckia-ism, is that it's about your best five, right? Like, it's about finding the best five.
Right, and their best five is Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu. Those are their best four.
Right.
The fit, it kind of falls off after that, but it at least gives you more flexibility in finding that fifth person.
If you feel like that Antonio Mafi, because I think he's the current guy that would have the inside track to make this work. Antonio Mafi is a better guard than Riley Reif is a right tackle.
At this point, yes.
Then what are we talking about?
So, to me, what this is going to come down to, and this is where it gets tough, is they said last year, we don't want to screw around with Onwenu. We don't want to screw around with his development. He's a guard. We're developing him at guard, period, end of story. And they were this close, Evan. They were minutes away from James Ferentz starting at left tackle against Von Miller.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
And ultimately, Trent Brown, he was sick. He pulled through. He didn't come out for warm-ups. He came out for the game. It didn't happen. But they were that determined. They were going to put James Ferentz out there against Von Miller rather than move Mike Onwenu out to tackle. So it was not happening last year. If it wasn't happening under that circumstance, it was never happening. They might have put a tight end out there. They might have gone out there with 4 linemen before they put Mike Onwenu at tackle. And to an extent, I do get that. When they were moving him all over the place in 2020 and 2021, right, I remember saying, you've got to pick a position for him long-term and let him develop there. Now, I think that position should be tackle because it's a hard position to find. There's a shortage of tackles in the NFL. If you have a guy who's a capable tackle, put him there and let him play there. So I would develop him at tackle. They chose guard. Now, to get back to this year, whose decision was that? Was it Bill Belichick or was it Matt Patricia as either the offensive line, either as the offensive line coach or offensive coordinator?
So I think that they viewed, we all know everybody did. Holy crap, that thing is huge.
There's a bug in here.
They viewed Mike Onwenu as the guard coming in.
Yeah.
And he has a guard body type. He's thick, he's burly, he's stouter. He's built like a guard, looks like a guard, walks like a guard. And I think that they always felt like the tackle thing was kind of out of nowhere for everybody, including people in the organization. So they moved him back to his natural position in their eyes. And maybe that's the way that it ends up being. I just think two things. One, they have more solutions to me at guard than they do at tackle potentially.
Many more.
And secondly, I think that there's something to be said that it's easier to protect the guard than it is to protect the edge. It's easier to hide a guard. It just is. Especially if you're sandwiching.
Well, yeah, because there's guys on each side of him instead of just one side.
Right, and especially if you're sandwiching in between David Andrews and Mike Onwenu, who might be your two best offensive linemen, right? So they'll keep him they'll keep the right guard afloat just like they did with Cole Strange last year. And hopefully now that Cole Strange is going into year 2, he doesn't need to be treated with kid gloves, right? Like hopefully they can allow him to just kind of play his game. So I think that there's an element to that as well. All right, so I'm with Onwenu at guard or at tackle if they have to make that move. I'd rather watch them make that move than watch right tackle be a turnstile again all year and figure it out with the rookies in the inside. That's how I feel. Connor McDermott quickly, Jack and Abba emailing in. I don't think Connor McDermott is somebody that would go through waivers, right?
I have zero idea how the waiver process works.
So I can't remember if it's how many years McDermott has like officially been in the league, but I don't think that he would be somebody that would need to pass through waivers. But I'd have to confirm that. But let's take a phone call, and then we'll move over to the defensive side of the football. Noah is in Toronto. Thanks for waiting, Noah. What's going on?
Hey, guys. I had 2 takes on the tackle situation that I wanted to kind of get off my chest. The first was just that I'm kind of confused by the Riley Reef contract still. I feel like it was kind of a lot of money. And there's 2 sort of younger tackles who I think played better last year that were out there, and Cameron Fleming and Jermaine Illuminor that I kind of would have preferred they signed. And then the second thing is just like, I feel like they've invested so little draft capital in tackle over the past few years. I guess depending on how you view City Sal, but they haven't drafted a tackle in the 5th round or higher in the last 4 drafts. And I think this year they had Juwan Jones sitting there in the 4th round, and I really kind of feel like they took a shot. They should have taken a shot at him. So I don't know. I guess it's all kind of in the past now, but those are my takes on tackle. Thanks.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks for the call. Yeah, look, Alex, we've been doing shows for a couple years together now. I mean, more than that. I don't even know how many years now. How many years have we talked about tackle in the draft?
Every single year.
It seems like every single year. It is a position that they've more or less kicked down the can down the road. And you mentioned DeJuan Jones. We both really like DeJuan Jones. We both had DeJuan Jones as a end of first, early second round player. I don't hold DeJuan Jones against them quite yet because clearly there was something going on with DeJuan Jones. Like there was something going on in the league with DeJuan Jones that made it. He was not a 4th round tackle on film. Right. He wasn't. So there was something going on behind the scenes that they didn't like about him, that other teams didn't like about him as well. So in the interest of fairness, the other thing I'll say about this tackle situation, because it is on paper, they look like they're going to have a weakness at tackle. They do. And I think the one thing that you have to hang your hat on, if you're a Patriots fan hoping for the best, is that Bill O'Brien and Adrian Clem will figure it out. They'll coach it up. They'll coach around it. You know, there's ways, obviously, that we know that you can coach around having poor tackle play. You know, shorter passes, quicker releases, stepping up in the pocket, like all these other sort of things, you know, that they can do to work around it. So is it possible that they feel they can just kind of cover it up?
I mean, it seems like that, right?
Yeah.
Their actions kind of suggest that.
So I think that's where they're at with it. Look, we can argue, or we can not even argue. We can agree and go back and forth on this a million times about how they went into the draft saying that they feel good about their tackle depth. All of us looked at their tackle depth and were like, I don't know. And now we're going to have to see who ends up being correct. Like that's how this all comes down to, right? So let's move over to defense, starting with the defensive line. So I have defensive line, and I have your least favorite, edge and linebacker, all as separate positions.
Of course you do.
So defensive line, I have 7 guys. These are true, like, hand-in-the-dirt defensive linemen.
Okay.
Christian Barmore.
Yeah.
I do have Keon White here, but I think that
I have
change.
him with my defensive line, too.
Yep. So Christian Barmore, Keon White, Devon Godshaw, Dietrich Wise, Lawrence Guy, Carl Davis, Daniel Aquale. So off would be Sam Roberts, Jeremiah Farms, and Justice Tafai.
All right, so we're in line so far because all the players, I have none of those players in other positions. I don't have Lawrence Guy though.
So he's on the fence. He certainly isn't. What do you think happens with Lawrence Guy?
I think he retires.
Think he retires?
I just don't. What is he holding out for? That's what I don't understand. I was already on a relatively player-friendly deal. He's 33 years old. They just drafted a player with a similar, with a similar skill set to his. I don't understand where his leverage is unless it's, and we see players do this from time to time, I'm not sure if I want to play next year, so let me see if I can get some more money. Let me see if I can get some more money. Goes team, I don't know if I want to be back. Can you entice me to be back? I think people think of holdout as this malicious thing that's like, screw the team. I deserve more money. I'm great. And it's like, it's not always that. Sometimes it can come from so many different things. It's not always this animosity-driven concept. Right. And sometimes see players that say, I don't really want to play again. If you gave me some more money, maybe that would change my mind, set me up better for retirement. But for what you're paying me, I don't know. I want to go through another year of this. And again, Lawrence Guy's 33 at a position that players generally retire in their early to mid-30s. I don't know anything. There's no inside information here. But it's just like when I put it all together, that's kind of what I get. He's also not everything we know about him. He's not the kind of guy that would sit there and say, well, I'm now the 31st. I don't know what number he actually is, but call it. I'm now the 31st highest paid defensive lineman in the NFL, and I should be 25th. And until you write that wrong, I'm not suiting up. It's not who he is.
Yeah.
I think he's just trying to figure out whether or not he wants to play or not.
So there has been some rumblings behind the scenes about Lawrence Guy dating back to last year, in training camp last year, where there was some uncertainty there about how much he had left in the tank, how much he really wanted to play,
right,
and stuff like that. He ends up playing last year. He was Lawrence Guy, taking on blocks, holding the B gap like Lawrence Guy, 5 technique, 4-eye, like that type of player. But at the same time, once you start thinking about it, once it starts creeping in, there was like some just general sort of, I don't know what the word is, just he wasn't sure how much he wanted it anymore. Like, I think that was going on already starting last summer.
A lot of players say this too, especially guys who play into their mid-30s, and they'll be, when you know it's time to retire, and just like, you just kind of know.
Yeah.
You sort of, when you know, and maybe he's hit that point. So I don't see how he holds out in the, what resolves the holdout? Are the Patriots going to give him more money?
They shouldn't.
Right. So
yeah,
whether he retires, whether he gets cut, however it formally happens, that holdout to me is him basically saying, I'm done with the Patriots.
Okay, so if Lawrence Guy isn't in this mix for you, you only have 6 guys making it with Lawrence Guy not in the mix.
Correct.
Do you think that then opens up a spot for somebody that I think a lot of other fans want to see a little bit of Sam Roberts?
Maybe. So I went a little heavy at linebacker. So I just
I cut at linebacker.
Okay.
And you went the opposite.
I moved it to the second level. I pushed to the second level. So because I mean, they have all their bases covered. You've got Godshaw and Davis as nose tackles.
Yep.
You've got Barmore and Aquale as kind of your athletic interior linemen, and then you've got
Wise and Keon.
Wise and White on the edge with their depth coming from the linebacker position. So I like what's maybe another edge guy, and I guess that would be Roberts. But I also feel like he's got to have a strong camp to make that happen. But it's also, I had. I did have him on. Never mind, I forgot to change it. Yeah, maybe some other edge guy steps up, but I think there's as much a chance that happens. We could all say Ronnie Perkins, if he's going to do the Anthony Jennings thing and have the third year be the year. I would say he has just as good of a chance as Sam Roberts. It's one of those things, again, where forget the players competing for the spot. Does the spot exist? We both had the 5th wide receiver on, but as I said before, we all thought there was going to be a 5th wide receiver. Last year, there wasn't. Maybe this is what happens. Maybe we think that it's, Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, Trey Nixon, Ed Lee all competing for that last wide receiver spot, and then we get to cutdown day, and all of a sudden they're keeping Ronnie Perkins or they're keeping Sam Roberts with only 4 wide receivers. Like, this would be the other side of that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to linebackers. I have it broken up as edge and
of course you do.
Regular linebacker. I did edge/outside linebacker for you. I knew to be a little bit
I actually just have linebackers.
So my outside linebackers, because I'll stop saying edge so you don't jump off the bridge. My outside linebackers are Matthew Judon, Josh Uche, and I have Jelani Tavai with the outside guys.
Good.
I do not have Anthony Jennings or Ronnie Perkins on this team right now.
Jennings was one of my last. I think he was my last guy on. Second to last.
So
guy
Jennings
on.
is my first cut, last guy off.
Okay.
So
54th player.
54th player. At some point in time, you have to actually do something on an NFL football field for me to call you an NFL player.
What is Jennings? He played a ton last year.
He didn't play a ton. I am going to tell you this with all due respect. I have not noticed or seen Ronnie Perkins do anything.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Jennings.
I am Jennings too.
Perkins hasn't done anything. I agree with you on that.
Jennings, I think, exists. Like he's out there. I see him doing things on a football
350 snaps last year.
On special teams?
On defense. 343 snaps on defense last year.
I don't even remember that happening.
32% usage rate last year on defense. Yeah.
Anthony Jennings?
And then a 38% rate on special teams.
That's shocking to me. That tells you how little he actually made an impact, that I don't even remember him paying 300 snaps last year. That's a ton. Are you sure?
Yeah. It's Pro Football Reference. I'm looking at it right now.
That's incredible. That's how little impact those guys have had. How long are we going to go on, giving those guys roster spots, I guess is my point. Now, maybe I think Anthony Jennings ultimately they'll find a spot for Anthony Jennings on this team because they're going to probably be a little bit more odd front heavy. They're going to play a decent amount with two, stand up outside linebackers on the edge of the line. But the way I look at it is Jelani Tavai kind of crosses those two positions, right? He's like a hybrid of those, the off-ball, on-ball position. So he's going to log some snaps on the line of scrimmage. And then I also think that Keon White could technically be listed as an outside linebacker just as easily as a defensive lineman. Yeah. So where does Anthony Jennings actually play other than just being like a backup? And so
he's another edge guy.
If that's a spot that they need to be a little bit thin to fit some other people on the roster, I wouldn't hate it. Now, I think that ultimately I had 10 offensive linemen on. I think that ultimately ends up being 8 or 9, and Anthony Jennings ends up getting a spot once one of the rookies goes on IR on the offensive line or something like that. But I still haven't seen anything from Anthony Jennings in his playing time, and I haven't seen anything from Ronnie Perkins at all, anywhere. Practice, training camp, preseason, anything. So until one of those guys starts to actually show something to me, I'm going to consider them strongly on a roster bubble. That's just where I'm at with them.
So I'm just looking at my thing right now, Evan. You know I do the thing about at-large roster spots, right?
Yes.
I have them currently with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at-large rosters. 10 at-large roster spots. So 10 spots that can truly be won by the best player regardless of position. I think Anthony Jennings fits into that bubble. I don't know exactly where, but I think he does.
That's fair. I think he'll probably make the team. Initially, I think it's mainly about Keon White. Keon White's obviously going to be a huge part of what they're going to do defensively, and he's going to be an end-of-the-line player. Whether he's hand in the dirt or he's standing up is really, it's semantics, right? It doesn't really matter. He's going to be an end-of-the-line player. So between him and Judon and Tavai, that's your early down edge players. And then obviously Uche is going to come on the field in passing situations to rush the quarterback. So Anthony Jennings is depth. And Ronnie Perkins is even further down the line of depth. So do you have Ronnie Perkins on or off?
I have Ronnie Perkins off. I have Jennings on. So do middle linebackers. I think I know where we differed on this.
So middle linebackers, I have Juwan Bentley. I have Marty Mapu with the linebackers.
Yeah.
Mac Wilson, Chris Board. And then I have Terez Hall off. So I have those 4 guys.
Okay, I didn't have them keeping Mac Wilson.
Interesting.
Because, your whole thing about how, Anthony Jennings was never on the field, so they're not going to keep him. Mac Wilson was never on the field. He didn't play after week 9.
Yeah, after he didn't push Josh Allen out of bounds, he benched him.
Right. So
yeah,
that was my last decision
when
I was putting this together was Anthony Jennings, Mac Wilson, who's getting that last spot, and I had Mac Wilson on, and then I thought about it, and then I had Jennings on, and I changed it, but what it came down to was Mac Wilson did not play at the end of the year last year, and he's not going to start. He's not going to start. Marte Mapu is in that role. Anthony Jennings played significantly last year, and I think
I slept on how much Anthony Jennings played because he literally did not make an impact on the field.
And I think there's more of a need for his skill set than Wilson's skill set on this defense right now. So that was my tiebreaker.
So I think the big thing
it literally came down to I don't know where Ronnie Perkins came into this conversation. We both have him off.
Yeah.
That's what it was to me. It was Jennings or Mac Wilson. And I went with Jennings.
So the reason why I went with Mac Wilson over Jennings is because, one, Raekwon McMillan's injury basically leaves them very thin with experienced veteran linebackers. It's basically just Bentley and Mac Wilson at this point, unless you want to count Chris Board, which I don't.
I count Chris Board, and I also count Jelani Tavai.
Okay, I guess that's fair, but I don't know how much off-ball linebacker they really want Jelani Tavai playing. I don't want him playing any off-ball.
I don't either, but he will. So
the thing is that that's one thing is about the experience, right, behind Bentley.
Right.
The other thing is A, how do they view Marty Mapu? Is he a safety or is he a linebacker in their mind? And B, how much are they going to really put on his plate in year one? We know he's got the potential to be a really good player for them. We can see it from the spring. But is that mean that they're going to put a rookie linebacker out there for 50% of the snaps, right? So that more versatile, more athletic, I guess is a better word than versatile, that more athletic coverage style linebacker, that's his role in this defense. And until Marty Mapu is ready to wear the hat, then Mac Wilson is the best guy to fit that spot.
But they don't play him. So everything you just said is why I had him on initially. What if Mapu's not ready?
Yeah.
They're clearly building this role into this defense. They need somebody there in case Marte Mapu can't go, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I was but they had a chance to do that last year and they just didn't.
Yeah.
So that's again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm so 50-50 on that one. That was the hardest choice I made. Anthony Jennings, Mac Wilson. Which guy is it? But
that's the hardest choice.
Of all the stuff on the roster projection, yeah, that was the toughest one.
Okay.
What was tougher for you?
The whole roster.
Well, okay. All right.
I'm just messing with you.
Go watch Xavier Worthy. Either way, I could see it going either way. I just couldn't get past the fact that he didn't play the whole second half of last season, and then all of a sudden now he's on the roster.
I think if Raekwon McMillan never gets hurt, then I could definitely see. I would definitely feel more strongly about in your camp that Mac Wilson is not going to be on this team. I just don't know how you go into the year with basically the only linebacker that's played your Mike position and played it at any sort of experience in the NFL, anywhere, being Juwan Bentley. That's the only guy that they would have that has any sort of serious NFL playing time.
And Tavai.
And
Chris Board.
But Chris Board's playing on special teams.
He's going to play defense.
And Tavai's
going to play some defense.
And Tavai's playing on the line of scrimmage. I digress.
Yeah, we just agreed. We got to agree, disagree at this point.
Corners. So there's the obvious caveat before I read corners. Jack Jones is not suspended by the league. He's still a New England Patriot as far as 3:30 on July 6th goes. So I have him on. But legally, we don't know, right? We don't know where this is heading. But just from a football standpoint, I have him on. Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, and then I have Miles Bryant on right now. And the reason why I have him on is because of Jack Jones. If Jack Jones is not available to play, then they need to keep Miles Bryant, I think. But initially, I actually had Isaiah Bolden over Miles Bryant. I do think that there's a world that if Jack Jones, don't want to get too much into the legal stuff, but if Jack Jones somehow figures this stuff out legally, that one of the rookie corners, Amir Speeder, is Isaiah Bolden, could make the team over Miles Bryant. But until we have a real concrete answer of what the situation is with Jack Jones, I have to skew on the fact that he's probably not going to be available to play. And I think they have to go with the experience at that point.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. And let's be honest, they like Miles Bryant. And for all the crap he gets, he's a very smart football player. He's a solid tackler. I think he's probably a safety. I wouldn't play him at corner, but
he's definitely not. What he's not is he's not a man coverage player.
Right.
He's not a man coverage defender, whether it's covering receivers, tight ends, whatever. He's not a man coverage defender. I actually think he's a really good zone defender. I do. I think he's an above average zone DB. But they play their fair share of zone, but they obviously play a lot of man. And if he's your slot corner playing man on slot receivers, we've seen that movie before. We know how it looks. Ideally, Marcus Jones is that guy this year.
Right.
So you're really talking about...
Ideally, it's Jonathan Jones.
Right, but assuming that Jack Jones isn't available, it's going to be Marcus Jones. And that would then allow Miles Bryant to really be like your fourth defensive back, who's more of like a dime package type of guy, which is a better role.
Is a fine role for him, yeah. He also, he plays on special teams and all that. I wrote, could he get beat out by one of the athletic rookies, Isaiah Bolden and/or Amir Speed? It's possible, but right now he can't not be the favorite for that last spot.
Yeah, I agree. I keep coming back to it because I really wanted to put one of the rookies on the roster over him.
Of course, more fun that way.
I really wanted to, but I couldn't do it because of the significant amount of snaps that Miles Bryant has played in this defense. And if they don't have Jack Jones in the mix, then they really need the experience, I think, at that spot, especially with basically a new look communication system now in the back end with Devin McCourty gone. So they need guys that know the system. Moving on to safeties. Kyle Duggar. I have 5 safeties. I kept all 5 of them. Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, Jabril Peppers. I have Jalen Mills with the safeties. And I also have Joshua Bledsoe making it. So the only cut is Brad Hawkins here. We know, I think, pretty much what they're getting out of Duggar, Phillips, and Peppers. Like, those guys' roles are pretty set in stone. Does Duggar play a little bit more single high? Does he play a little bit more deep safety this year? I think he probably does. But ultimately, we know that those 3 guys are probably going to be on this team. Jalen Mills is a really interesting player to me. I'm actually kind of excited. Is that crazy? About him actually playing where he belongs.
Yeah.
And I actually think that he's going to be a really serviceable player for them. And you talk about a guy that can play some slot, can roll out wide if he needs to roll out wide. And when I say roll out wide, I mean spin out wide, right? You can spin the dial on the quarterback now where Jalen Mills can take a flat. He can take a third on the outside and play it like a corner if he ultimately has to, but you don't have to actually line him up at outside corner anymore. I think that he's going to be so much in such better shape just in terms of his actual performance on the field, playing safety than playing corner. But at the same time, and this is sort of why I think he's a valuable piece, if Jack Jones' situation continues to go south, he does give you depth at outside corner. He is somebody that can't kick back outside. So now he essentially fills 2 spots for you with one player, which is a nice thing to have. Yeah,
and they have a couple guys like that. He's probably the highlight, but I'm with you. When he signed here at first, remember we all thought it was to replace Patrick Chung?
Yeah.
So he's a fine corner, and I think he still will play boundary corner in certain matchup situations, especially if they don't have Jack Jones.
Bigger receivers.
Yeah. Right. But I think he brings an interesting element to the back end. Really, I'm just excited to see him cover tight ends.
Yeah.
Because they've struggled at covering tight ends the last few years. If there is a weakness in Kyle Duggar's game, I think it's that. I think it's man coverage on tight ends. That is an assignment Jalen Mills should be able to handle and should be able to handle at a high level, and that's going to help them out a lot. Because how many times last year did it seem like they had the receivers covered, the pass rush is getting there, and then boom, the tight end leaked out on somebody and was able to run wide open. That shouldn't happen with Jalen Mills in that role.
It's interesting because I agree with you that he should be almost elite at covering tight ends because he's so used to covering wide receivers.
Right.
And when you talk to guys about that, I remember in 19, the Patriots were playing the Eagles, and Zach Ertz was still a problem back in 19. So on 3rd down, they moved Stephon Gilmore onto Zach Ertz for 3rd down. And he talked about it after the game that he actually had to slow himself down because he's so used to covering such fast guys on the outside that he had to slow himself down to not over pursue on Zach Ertz. And so Mills' biggest issue is his long speed. It's always been his biggest issue. It's carrying verticals, carrying crossers down the field. He's just he doesn't have this foot speed to do it. Tight ends aren't as fast as receivers, right? It's just science. So in theory, I think that he should be a really good man coverage guy on tight ends. That frees up Kyle Duggar to now play more of that rover zone style role where he can kind of float and ball hawk and hunt the football and things like that, which I think is better for everybody, Kyle Duggar individually and the defense as a whole. I would love to see Duggar more involved in everything. He could blitz more. now. He could play the deep part of the field more. He could play the robber role more. He could bracket more. Like all the things that they used to do with Rodney Harrison are now in play because they have somebody that can cover him.
Modernized version of what they did with Rodney Harrison.
You don't want him taking people's heads off? Is that what you're saying?
I do, but it's a lot of penalty yards.
Well,
it's going to be a lot of penalty yards.
Someone's got to do it to Josh Allen eventually, but that's a separate conversation when we get into the
Bills.
Bills.
That in a couple months, we can have that conversation.
Get into the Bills preview. All right, let's go specialists, and then we'll do our little AFC East preview.
We just did safety.
We just did safety. Joshua Bledsoe, do you have him on or off?
Last guy on.
I have him on.
They like him. I know they like him. Special teams, turnover, all of that. He sticks.
Yeah, another guy that can play tight ends as well, I think, a little bit. All right, specialists. Right now I have the rookies winning. I have specialists and I have coverage aces. I don't know if you do coverage aces.
So I call it specialists and special teamers.
Okay. So I'll just combine them both. I have the rookie specialists winning the jobs.
I still have Waitman was the better player in the spring.
You're the punter guy, so I'm going to
now that is so the way I wrote this, I was not projecting the summer. I said if it were to be decided today, this is where we would be at. And Waitman's shown me more. Now, it's razor thin, and there's absolutely room for that to change. But Waitman showed me more through the spring, so he has the edge right now.
Better.
The hang times were better. They were more. It's not even that they were better. They weren't better.
More consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Behringer had some absolute boots, but he had some absolute duds. I thought Waitman, they're going to value consistency over upside. They just want to know what they're going to get so they can go cover it. I also thought he's got the one thing that's really tough about punters, because you're the film guy and it's going to kill you. So much of it is the kind of rotation they put on the ball when it comes off their foot, the way the spiral, where it is on the axis, all that. You really can't see that on film.
No.
You kind of have to see it in person and just you can get an idea based off how the ball rolls when it hits the ground and how guys catch it, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So, like, watching Waitman last year, I didn't think his rotation was all that special, but I saw it in person, and it is.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. So, again, still razor thin. Still, it's very much up for grabs. Call it 51-49, but if I had to pick somebody from the spring, I thought Waitman was better.
Well, I'll give it to you. Waitman, I had Behringer just because of the draft pick, honestly. But
so that factors in as well.
Yeah.
But, sixth round.
So I don't really see a scenario, and I love Nick Folk. Nick Folk's been really solid for the Patriots. Honestly, I say this again, not to be hyperbolic. Nick Folk, I almost saved them at the kicker spot when Steven Gostkowski retired and was basically washed. They were in really, remember Mike Nugent was here for a week or two, right? It was really bad.
The Nuge.
It was really bad. And I give Folk all the credit in the world for steadying that position. They drafted Chad Ryland in the 4th round. He looked the part in the spring to me. Has control on the ball. Certainly has a bigger leg, obviously, at this stage of their careers. I just don't really see how Folk beats out Ryland, frankly. But I will say, I think that Folk could kick for another team in the league. So I don't leave this door completely open, because I think if they do cut him, that he's probably one of the 32 best kickers in the league and will get picked up someplace else.
But then it's, does he want to? Right. He's been commuting from Dallas. His family's still in Dallas. He sort of has a setup here. He might tell other teams, if New England wants me, they'll call me. But other than that, I'm good. Maybe the Cowboys would be the one team, and I guess the Texans.
Yeah. Could you see them keeping him on the practice squad at all, just because they do funky things with kickers?
If he was up for it, I think they're going to keep. I think both punters are going to be here.
Yeah.
With Folk, I don't see why he would do that. Unless it's who was remember during COVID there were the emergency practice squad quarterbacks. They're on the practice squad, but they were just stay home.
Yeah.
Right? We just don't want you here because we can't have you getting exposed.
Yeah.
That's where it's at for me. Is if Folk was all right, if you don't want to lose me, sign me to the practice squad, but I'll stay in shape down here in Dallas. I don't see what's in that for him.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. In terms of the coverage aces, as I call them, obviously Slater.
Slater.
Obviously Brandon Schooler, I think is obviously. And then I have Jordan Heelig as the last spot right now. They really like this kid. They were really working with him in the spring. He was typical Patriot UDFA signing where he wasn't on anybody else's radar except the Patriots, and they pick up this kid. Now, I think they really like DeMarcus Mitchell as well. So I think that's a true
So I have both on.
battle. You have both on.
Yeah, so my cut was Raleigh Webb.
I also have Raleigh Webb.
Right. I think they find a way to keep all four, Slater, Schooler, Mitchell, and Helig.
Okay.
And then the other guy is Cody Davis, but he wasn't totally healthy this spring. And
right. That's why I have Cody Davis currently off, but I think he is definitely a vested veteran, so he doesn't go through waivers.
Right.
So my guess is that Cody Davis will be here on the practice squad, and just hedging that, I would say he probably gets elevated game day elevation, and he's active week 1 against the Eagles if he's healthy.
Yeah.
But I think that he gets cut initially.
I also just wonder if he's healthy. That's the other part of it. Like, does he
that
open the season on PUP?
That was a really bad knee injury.
Yeah, it was
really
significant. Like, I could see him opening the year on PUP, and then they get 6 weeks? I need to remind myself of all this. Like, I take a day before camp every year.
Weeks.
You know, does he open on PUP? And because does he need camp? Like, he knows what he's doing.
No. So I think the tough part is that their special teams, their protection units did take a hit without Cody Davis. They got much worse after Cody.
But I think that's beyond Cody Davis. Yeah. That's the point. And they've brought in a guy like Jordan Helig. They've brought in a guy like Chris Board. Yeah. Guys like that where Cody Davis, PUP for 6 weeks, and then, all right, we'll see where we're at then. Maybe somebody gets hurt, or maybe just the unit's not good, and we need to bring you back then. But it's tough. There's so many ways to keep him without putting him on the week 1 roster and I don't think they risk losing him, that I don't think they need to necessarily keep him.
Okay, so there's our roster projections. My last 3 off, like my 54, 55, and 56 were Anthony Jennings, Malik Cunningham, and Anthony Firkser.
Wow, you had Cunningham close.
I had Cunningham pretty close. I did.
So my last 3 all on defense. Actually, all 6 of mine, 5 are on defense. My last 3 off were Lawrence Guy, Mac Wilson, and Isaiah Bolden.
Interesting.
Those were 54, 55, and 56. And then my last 3 on were Jordan Helig, Anthony Jennings, and Joshua Bledsoe.
So I think you're going to end up being right about Anthony Jennings. He'll make the team. I didn't realize how many snaps he played last year.
Next time.
Well, I just go off, you know me. I go off of what I see on the film, and like it just, when you are literally non-existent in my brain, I check out. Okay, so that's how that goes.
350 snaps.
It's a lot of snaps. That's a lot more than I would have thought. If you had asked the average Patriots
it's 349.
If you whoa, don't give him that extra
I'll give
snap.
You that. Oh, 343.
If you gave him 7 extra snaps, come on, man. If you ask the average Patriots fan how many snaps Anthony Jennings played last year, over under 10.
It's 21 a game.
Do you think that they had any clue he played that much?
Fans that know their stuff would say that.
It's fair. But I don't know. I feel like you'll be right about that. I'll give you that. I think I was too heavy on the offensive line. I think 10 offensive
I had 10 offensive linemen too.
It's a lot. I think it's too many. I think they'll be at 8 or 9, and Anthony Jennings will be on the team. All right, do you want to quickly do finish up our AFC East previews, because I don't want to spend too much time on this next week because we want to preview training camp and stuff. But let's start with the Jets. The Jets on paper. Is it crazy? Is it crazy to say that the Jets roster on paper is actually the best roster in the division?
No, it is. It is, but it's so, like Madden ratings it is, but it's so boom or bust. And it starts with the quarterback. Are they going to get an engaged Aaron Rodgers, like an FU to the world Aaron Rodgers, or are they going to get a guy that's checked out like he was in Green Bay? And I know people think, oh, well, he's in New York, he's got a new team, he's got reason to care. What if they lose their first couple games, which isn't unrealistic? So
we're hinging. See, here's the thing. The reason why I said that is because these two teams we're doing today, the Jets and the Bills, I think the Bills roster has more holes in it than it's had in recent years. I do. And we can get to like where those holes are, but I think those holes exist in Buffalo a little bit more than they have in the past couple years. I think the Jets roster is better than the Bills.
Yeah,
I do.
would agree with that.
And I agree with you that the whole thing hinges on Aaron Rodgers. Like, if Aaron Rodgers is MVP Aaron Rodgers, then they're a Super Bowl contender.
The Bills are definitively better than the Jets at 2 positions. Tight end and wide receiver. That's it.
Yeah. Do you think they're better at wide receiver?
I mean, the Jets don't have anybody that touches Stephon Diggs.
Garrett Wilson's not a bad player.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs is.
I agree with you that
the Jets. I'm not saying the Jets are bad at wide receiver. They've got a good group.
They do have a good
group. And they have more depth.
Yeah,
they have more depth. But Diggs is. You know my take on Diggs.
Yeah,
is that Diggs is the reason Josh Allen is who Diggs is a massive reason Josh Allen is who he is. So
he is getting older though, and he is getting
that's true.
And he is getting disgruntled.
You know what? We can revisit this one. You know what? We can revisit. This
I
one.
I don't know why I'm like the biggest Stephon Diggs fan.
No, but you know what? But I said definitively. Clearly, it's not definitive. All right, so the Bills have one position over the Jets, tight end.
Yeah.
And I just remember the Jets got Zach Kuntz, so maybe not.
Well, in Conklin, Jack Conklin's like not a bad tight end. He's just not.
He's fine.
He's not dynamic.
I like Dawson Knox. I think Dawson Knox is a good player.
And I don't know, depending on where you put. Oh, God damn it, Dalton Kincaid.
Dalton Kincaid. Well, apparently he's a slot receiver.
So this is where they're at in Buffalo. They are legitimately arguing about this point. Is Dalton Kincaid a tight end or a slot receiver?
To be fair, we're kind of doing that with Marte Mapu.
We're also, but like I guess okay.
But the Patriots drafted Marte Mapu to play Marte Mapu's role. The Bills in a draft great with slot receivers, needing a slot receiver, drafted a tight end to play slot receiver. It's like the Jags with Travis Etienne. The mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat.
We're supposed to be doing the Jets. Let's get to the Bills in a second because I know we both have takes on the Bills. So here's my because we have to play this game as a Patriot podcast. Here's my holes for the Jets. Where could it fall apart? Obviously, the biggest one is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the biggest one. If he is not locked in, if he's washed, even I'll say it, if he's washed, then maybe that doesn't look as good as it possibly could. I think the other hole from a roster construction standpoint, because defensively they're loaded at all three levels. They are.
Yeah,
they're a great defense. From a roster construction standpoint, their offensive line is still a little bit questionable.
Yeah.
I have no idea if Mekhi Becton's going to – he's like their Trent Brown. You just don't know if he's going to have – what's his weight going to be like, what's his health going to be like, what's his focus going to be like. You just don't know any of those things. And they're still really counting on Mekhi Becton being a starting caliber tackle for them this year. They're thin along the tackle spots, certainly. They're in a similar boat as the Patriots where they're just kind of – throwing bodies at it and hoping that something sticks by the end of the year. So if you're the Patriots and you're playing the Jets, I still think what you hope is that your defensive front can take over against that offensive line and the pressure can get to Aaron Rodgers. I still think that's the game plan. That's the hope. The other thing is they hired Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator. And I understand that head coach and offensive coordinator are two very, very different jobs, right? And I get that Nathaniel Hackett failed in Denver as a head coach and not a coordinator. But outside of the Patriots, I think Denver was the worst coordinated offense in the league last year. And they had a real offensive coordinator, a real offensive coach. It wasn't like they put somebody where he didn't belong and it failed, right? So that still, I think, is in my mind, a big wild card. Now, Aaron Rodgers might trumpet and Aaron Rodgers might just make it good enough, but Bill versus Nathaniel Hackett is still a major mismatch. A major mismatch. So I think that's something that a feather you can put in the Patriots cap. Defensively for the Jets, really terrific, honestly, at all three levels. You got Quinnen Williams, CJ Mosley, Sauce Gardner, your three pillars on that side of the football. I guess maybe if you really, again, want to talk yourself into the Jets falling apart, Mosley is starting to get up there a little bit in terms of off-ball linebackers. You think of Kuechly, you think of Bowman. Those guys have retired early, historically, and he's somebody that's logged a ton of snaps over the years in Baltimore, and also obviously with the Jets. But they have a lot of really good players on that defense, and once and for all, Quinnen Williams, that's I think a huge X factor for the Patriots. He got Cole Strange benched last year. Yeah. He ate Cole Strange alive. Huff off the edge to I like
John Franklin Myers.
John Franklin Myers is sort of there, like Dietrich Wise, Swiss Army knife end. They also have Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, who they drafted, and then they just drafted Will McDonald. Now, they drafted Will McDonald early. We all agree on that.
Because they panicked.
Sure, but he's I think he's going to be like a Josh Uche type, where he's going to have a role and rotate in on passing downs and things like that. So the Jets defense is loaded. It's going to be interesting though, because it is the last thing about the Jets defense. It's a system defense. It's not a game plan defense really. They play that the new age Seattle 3. I don't even know what to call it. It's a new age Seattle 3. They play a little bit more too high. than Seattle did in the Legion of Boom days. But they play that zone-style defense, that match zone, the 3, the Mabel, that type of stuff. And Bill O'Brien's going to know what's coming. Like, it's just going to be a matter of executing, and do we have the players, do the Patriots have the horses to beat a Sauce Gardner, to beat who's the other quarter they have? May, right? No, that's the safety.
No, it's
I should have pulled this up. That's my fault.
Short guy.
I have the name on the tip of my tongue, but that's going to be the issue, I think, for them is how do they keep that system fresh? How do they keep that system? How do they keep teams guessing against that system? Because
DJ Reed,
yeah, he's a good player, by the way. That's going to be a question with them. But as currently constituted, I'm not like as afraid of Aaron Rodgers as I am still of the Jets defense. Like, I don't know how the Patriots score on this Jets defense with any regularity, and Aaron Rodgers is going to probably put 20 to 24 points on you.
You got to force turnovers. That's how they beat them in the past.
Yeah.
And they can do that against Rodgers. Not a lot of teams can, but Belichick has seemingly always gotten Rodgers turn the ball over. So
he did. He got Jack Jones pick 6.
Yeah,
big play in that game.
Yeah.
All right. The Buffalo Bills. This is Alex's favorite team in the NFL, isn't it? Yeah. Favorite team to rag on.
They were when Drew Bledsoe was there. They were my second favorite team.
So here's the thing with the Buffalo Bills. You're going to hate this take, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think the Buffalo Bills are contenders as long as Josh Allen is healthy. I think he makes them contenders. But at the same time, I do think that this roster that in Buffalo is as vulnerable as it's been for basically since like the COVID year.
Yeah.
Like last 3 years, they've been loaded on both sides of the football. I still don't really know, and maybe it's Dalton Kincaid, and we just mentioned the joke of, they drafted a tight end to play slot receiver instead of a slot receiver. But they're really hoping that Dalton Kincaid is going to emerge as the number 2 pass catcher and control the middle of the field. And then Stephon Diggs is obviously going to beat Stephon Diggs. I can't say that the Patriots are, the Patriots still haven't stopped Buffalo in a real game.
Yeah.
So I can't sit here and say that they're going to magically do it now. But outside of Stephon Diggs and, with Dalton Kincaid, we'll see. Like, I wasn't as high on Dalton Kincaid as a lot of other people were. I don't fully remember where you stood on Dalton Kincaid in the draft. I thought he was a little overrated.
I thought so too, yeah.
So we'll see what he ends up being. We probably will both be wrong about that, and he'll be a good player. But we'll see. I think that outside of Stephon Diggs, they still have a little bit of a receiver problem. Like, I don't know who. No one really scares
I think
you.
Including Stephon Diggs, they have a receiver problem.
Well,
they have a Stephon
reasons.
Diggs problem, and then they have a wide receiver depth problem. But yeah. Gabe Davis never took that next jump that he was supposed to take. Gabe Davis, look, nothing against Crevon LeBlanc. I like Crevon LeBlanc. But Gabe Davis beat up on Crevon LeBlanc, and they thought that he was the second coming of Justin Jefferson.
That's fair.
And that just was never going to be a thing. So you're right. The Bills' roster is as vulnerable as it's been. I think their window closed last year. Stephon Diggs is now over 30. Josh Allen's extension is kicked in. I know the whole thing about how the salary cap can be maneuvered. They've done a lot of maneuvering.
Yeah.
And it's put them in a tough spot. One thing I don't think has been talked about enough with them, their pass rush, really their whole defense, when they lost Von Miller last year, everything changed.
Yeah.
Everything changed for them. And they signed, who did they sign? Leonard Floyd a couple weeks ago. He's not Von Miller, and is Von Miller even going to be Von Miller? And the fact they signed Leonard Floyd leads me to believe this is a guy who's over 30 trying to come back from a torn ACL.
Yeah.
That is a mass. I think they should have taken a pass rush in the first round. That is a massive blow to their defense. Whatever is going on with Stephon Diggs, who knows? And they still have.
If you ask Josh Allen, it was media fabrication. But
all right. Well, if you ask the coach, it was seriously concerning.
Yeah.
When's the last time you heard a coach talk like that? I'm going to take the coach having the slip of the tongue over anything else. Speaking of the coach, he still can't win a big game.
I love this.
Am I wrong? When's the last time Sean McDermott won a big game?
No, you're not wrong.
And there is still this overarching question about Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills of where is the tipping point of how much you can run him. Because he's at his most effective when he's a regular running threat, but if you overdo it, he gets banged up. And as the years go on, the running's only going to take more and more of a toll on him. We saw it last year. So last year...
And that's the big conversation again this offseason in Buffalo is Josh Allen needs to run less.
And
their GM came out and said that he needs to run less.
But I think that they believe that there is this magic number of like carries that we're maximizing his running, but he won't get hurt. And they think that if they can just find that number, he's going to be unstoppable. I don't think that exists because you saw it last year. He hurt his elbow. They ramped his carries down. Teams started just dropping back into coverage like they did to him early in his career and daring him to run the ball when he wouldn't do it, and he couldn't make any of the throws. And then he runs too much and he gets hurt. So are the Bills going to win 10 games? Yes. I'm not sitting here saying they're screwed.
Yeah.
But this is a question that they can't answer. Brian Daboll got close. I don't think it's Van Pelt, right, is the OC?
No, it's Ken Dorsey.
Ken Dorsey. It was one of the early 2000s Bills backup quarterbacks. I knew that.
It's Ken Dorsey.
Dorsey doesn't have the answer. If Daboll didn't get it, I don't know who's getting it. Because I don't think that number exists because it's the NFL. One carry can get you hurt. It's not like, okay, his body can absorb 8 carries a game, so that's what we're giving him. All it takes is one big shot, and he still doesn't slide. He still doesn't go out of bounds. Maybe if he starts doing that, that helps, but he's still going to have to take hits. And that is the reason they can't win a big game. That is the reason they can't win in the playoffs. Well, that and they're afraid of bad weather. Soft-ass team up there in Buffalo. We want a roof on our stadium. We have one of the best home field advantages, but we don't care.
They're not getting a roof.
Josh Allen will totally still be here by the time the new stadium is built. The point being that I don't think that number exists. And until the Bills can solve that problem, and I don't know that it's a problem that can be solved, maybe they're a contender.
Yeah.
But they're never going I won't be able to take them seriously as like a true Super Bowl favorite.
Okay, so here's the problem with the Bills in my terms that I think is in the same on the same track as yours.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem with the Bills is that the Bills have no way of remember when the Patriots, we talk about it all the time. The Patriots would just win games by taking care of business.
Right.
They would just show up. They would play a polished, well-rounded football game. They wouldn't overexert themselves. They wouldn't overexert Brady. They wouldn't try to hang 50 on you, but they would just win 31-14 and ho-hum, we'll see you next week. And even though that's not the bottom line in the playoffs, in order to get Josh Allen to be at the peak when he hits the playoffs, they don't have anything in Buffalo. I shouldn't say they don't have anything. They don't currently at a high enough level have a layup in their offense. Because
Josh Allen can't play a safe game.
But it's not just that. I think what the bigger thing is they don't have a layup, right? They don't have a layup. They have 3-pointers. They're like the NBA of the NFL, right? Where when they come down on the Celtics, when they come down on you raining threes, and it's they hit 25 threes, they're gonna beat you by 30 points.
Right.
But what they don't have is they don't have the consistent half court offense. They don't just have that ability to just this is what we
except
go
against
to.
the Patriots for some reason.
Right.
They can do it against the Patriots, but nobody else.
Right, but this is what we go to. This is our stuff. This is what we're going to run, and we're going to matriculate the ball down the field, and we're going to score points on you, and we're going to shorten the game and do all that stuff. That some weeks and some games and some opponents in the playoffs, that's just how you have to win. And I think it's twofold. One, mainly it's Josh Allen, right? His playing style just lends itself to being hero ball.
Led the league in turnovers last year.
That's just the way he plays. And B, they don't really have a traditional running game. They don't have a hand the ball off, turn around and hand the ball off running game. They don't have it. And they don't have as a result, they don't have the play action sequencing off of that, right?
Right.
So that's how a lot of teams survive on early downs. The Bills don't really survive that way on early downs. The Bills survive on early downs by throwing the freaking rock. Just blitzing you, literally, on offense, and just trying to score 45 and getting out of there in that respect. So until they find something that's consistent, that's not volatile, that's not turnover prone, and they can just kind of hit you with it consistently, they are going to be a team that's either going to win by 30 or lose big, like they did against the Bengals, right? And there's no in between. So if you're,
but you can't trust those teams.
You can't trust them, and they signed Damian Harris this offseason.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up because they signed Damian Harris, they drafted James Cook. Was that last year? I do think that they recognize it. But schematically and in terms of their personnel on their offensive line, they have not been good enough without Josh Allen's legs being a factor. If they run read option, they can run the football.
Right.
But that means that his legs are a factor. That means that he's in the run play.
Because every team's going to take away Damian Harris and force him to keep it.
Right. There's no traditional run game in Buffalo. And that also doesn't lend itself to your point about the weather. Like when it gets cold and when it gets snowy up in Buffalo, like it did against Cincinnati.
Even Miami.
They have no running game. So the Bills are in a really weird spot because their offense is still good. Don't get me wrong. Like they're still a top 5 offense.
They're still going to win
in the
10,
league.
12 games.
They're still a great offense. Josh Allen is still an MVP caliber quarterback, but I think he is. But what
led the league in turnovers.
What they're learning in Buffalo is that that's like step one. Like now they have to be a championship team, right?
Is it too like I feel like the time for them to learn that lesson was last year. Because again, Allen now has this elbow problem, and he's another year older. Diggs is now 30. You've got extensions kicking in. There's not a ton of room to build up. Like, there's no more, Josh Allen's on an affordable deal. We're going to start putting pieces around him. The money's all been spent. This is the team.
It's just wild because they are so good offensively, so I don't want to, like, be, like, acting like they're, like, this terrible offense. They're so good offensively, but analytically, like, the metrics also back up, like, sort of your feelings on it. Is just, like, it's literally all boom or bust. He's either hitting a 60-yard bomb to Diggs like he did against the Patriots last year to basically put that game on ice, or he's throwing a pick, and there's like no in between.
Sustainable. That's what I've said since day one about Josh Allen. It's not sustainable. It's not replicatable.
Yeah.
He has flashes where he's great, but you can't set your watch to it. You can't count on it except for whatever reason against the Patriots. Against 30 teams in the NFL, they need to go 80 yards in 12 plays to ice the game. Can't do it. He'll throw a pick. Against the Patriots, I don't know. He does it. It's weird. But against every other, that's the thing he can't do. So that's why the Bills need to get, if they get up big early, which they can do because they're really good, they can play from ahead. But don't you dare ask the Buffalo Bills to win a close game because they can't do it because they don't have that ability to be up 4 points and run the clock out. They don't. It costs them.
I know Coward already made the comparison of the Celtics and the Bills, but they really are the Celtics of the NFL.
I mean, I was saying they were the Sixers.
I think they're the Celtics.
But they're
the Celtics. So last thing on the Bills.
But Celtics went to an NBA Finals. Celtics at least got there.
Last thing on the Bills before we wrap.
But also Joel Embiid won an MVP, so maybe they're not the Sixers either.
No Tremaine Edmonds anymore.
Right.
In Buffalo. That, I think, defensively, they still have the rest of their defense intact. You know, the two safeties, Hyde and Poyer, Matt Milano still
Those guys get hurt a lot, though.
They signed Ed Oliver to a big extension. So they still have, 9/11ths of their pieces, right? And now Kyer Ilum is supposed to step up and play a regular corner role to kind of solidify that spot, which was a little bit shaky last year at times. I'm interested to see how this works out with no Tremaine Edmonds, though, at the second level for them, because they had a great thing going with Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, and they kind of let each other thrive and let each other, bring out the best in one another. So how does Milano look now that he's the only guy there? How does the whole thing look without Tremaine Edmonds? I think is a factor as well, but. Benjamin Solak on the Ringer, who I like a lot. He wrote a great article. I think it was maybe right after the Bengals playoff game last year, or going into the playoffs about Buffalo's offense, and that people should kind of it goes into more detail about what we're sort of talking about the volatility of the Buffalo offense, and it's really interesting. They just do not have consistent stuff, but they can also just come out of the gate and just overwhelm you with talent and with Josh Allen and just be up 30 at a blink of an eye. But when they get into those like grinded out type of football games, like you mentioned, Alex, they don't have consistent stuff. Right. So we'll see if that changes this year with Dorsey. We'll be back next week and put a bow on this show for our training camp preview because I'm out the following week. But we have a plan in place maybe to do something the following week, even though I won't be here. I'll be on Martha's Vineyard with a nice week off before training camp. But we'll be back next week to do our full training camp preview. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.